All right, good morning, guys. It's Thursday morning, nearly 8 o'clock. Wanted to come on and give you an update. We got all the new data coming in for what's going to be a widespread winter storm for much of the mid-south, southeast, and parts of the southern plains. So here locally, what can we expect here in the Tennessee Valley? Well, cold air this morning. Wind chills are down into the single digits and teens. I mean, look at these temperatures. We're at 21 in Chattanooga, 17 in Scottsboro, 13 in Murphy. Those wind chill values here locally have dropped into the single digits. Even here in the valley, it feels like 6 in Lafayette, 8 in Cleveland, 4 in Altamont. We have those winds out of the north. So that is the kind of cold where you do not want to be outside for longer than 60 seconds. That's probably 60 seconds too much. If you're not a fan of the cold weather, you might want to book a ticket to Miami because it's going to be cold here for a while. Now, the big story is going to be, of course, the potential for a winter storm. And here in the Tennessee Valley, we're still expecting impacts. Today, ahead of this system, of course, we had the hard freeze this morning and overnight. Only going to top out in the 30s again. We'll have light winds, so the wind chill not a huge factor, but still could have an occasional gust up to 15, maybe 20. So it is going to be chilly out there, albeit it'll be sunny. Still going to be very cold. Here's a look at your winter weather alert. So we have winter storm warnings in the pink. The purple on the southern edge of this and kind of the northern fringes is winter weather advisory. Winter storm watches now including parts of Southwest Virginia, the Piedmont of North Carolina, all the way to the Outer Banks into upstate South Carolina, and of course we still have the winter storm watches. So places like Lexington, Kentucky, Nashville, Birmingham, Memphis, Little Rock, and Dallas all under a winter storm warning. Now, not saying every one of these locations is going to have the same type of weather because, Birmingham going to have more of an icing threat. Nashville, more of a snow threat. Same for those points northward. Little Rock and parts of southern Arkansas could be a little bit more of a mixed bag, but could be some heavy snow in those areas as well. So these systems are a headache and can be. Here locally, winter storm watch is still in effect for parts of the Tennessee Valley. You can see all of our counties in blue, which is about, I would say, 90% of our coverage area in a watch still. The other half is now in a winter storm warning. So Grundy, Van Buren, DeKalb, Jackson counties down in northeast Alabama, all under that warning. I would think the warnings will be extended further to the east later today, but you never know. We'll keep an eye on that. But I'm pretty sure they will be. We'll see what the National Weather Service in Peachtree City does for Atlanta and North Georgia, and what Morristown does for southeast Tennessee. And of course, GSP will handle western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina. So winter storm likely. It's been the talk of the town here. We got widespread snow coming into the Tennessee Valley tomorrow morning. The wild card is going to be sleet and freezing rain. Initially, this looked like it was going to be more of an all-snow event. Now we're going to have warm air coming in from the south, and that could complicate things such as snow totals, road conditions, and just the forecast in general becomes a lot more difficult when you're dealing with multiple precipitation types. But nonetheless, this is all starting as snow here in the Tennessee Valley. So you're going to see snow tomorrow morning regardless. What happens in the afternoon and evening, that's still up for discussion and kind of up in the air at this point. But snow arrival on Friday, 4 to 6 as we get into Huntsville, Fort Payne, starts to spread in from the southwest. Tullahoma, Dunlap, Chattanooga, Dalton, LJ, Blue Ridge, between about 6 and 8, that starts to spread to the north and east. And then after about 10 o'clock, it starts to move into Knoxville and parts of the Tri-Cities in northeast Tennessee and western North Carolina. So that's just a general timing. Could be an hour earlier, might be a little bit later. I think it's probably going to trend earlier, if anything. So we may get that snow starting as early as 5:30 here in Chattanooga and in the metro area. So that's just a general timing. Again, that can change just a little bit. Here's a look at our system in all its glory. Now bringing sleet, freezing rain to parts of central Texas, the Panhandle getting some heavy snow, snow breaking out across southern Oklahoma. Dallas right now kind of on the outside looking in. Will they get winter weather? That's definitely possible. We'll see what happens as we continue into the rest of the day, how this unfolds. But low pressure is going to form off the southeast Texas coastline, track across the Gulf, so there's going to be plenty of moisture. So we have this energy kind of coming together. If they phase, stronger storm. If they don't quite phase, we could have slightly a weaker storm. That's just the two energies coming together. So we'll watch that, but nonetheless, going to be an impactful day across the southern plains and eventually the mid-south. High to moderate impacts expected in the orange here locally across the Tennessee Valley. Moderate impacts here in the city. So here's the thing. we've been cold. I mean, really cold recently, especially today. Teens, 30s for highs. Yesterday we only hit 34 in Chattanooga. The average high is right around 52, so nearly 20 degrees below normal. And our average low this time of year, 32. So our high was closer to the average low. You know, it's been cold. You get it. But anything that falls, especially if we get heavy snowfall rates, which I think will happen in the morning, these roads are going to be pretty bad. So I would probably put the orange widespread and the red in some of the metro areas, because it don't take much. We've seen it in the past in Atlanta and Birmingham, upstate South Carolina, even here in Chattanooga. When there's winter weather, I mean, we have the resources in TDOT, the Department of Transportation in Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. They all do the best they can, but we don't have the resources like they do up north. So it can be difficult, and if the snow comes down too heavy or too quickly, the roads, it's just hard to keep up with, and we're going to have some issues coming into play probably by the middle of tomorrow morning, because it should stick pretty quickly. We're not going to have this melting process that we so often do across the Tennessee Valley. So I want to show you a couple of things, because this is turning into one heck of a forecast. It's going to be pretty difficult. This is our in-house model. The resolution's a little bit higher. This is the latest stuff coming out this morning. So by about 2, 3 o'clock, snow's already moving in. So this has it moving in even sooner. So those numbers that I showed you earlier with the onset arrival time, I should say, could be earlier. Certainly possible you wake up tomorrow morning, it's already snowing. Moving into Chattanooga, probably going to be pretty light at first. So what generally happens when these systems move in, you'll see the blue on the radar. It doesn't quite hit the ground because there's still dry air overhead. So it has to go through this process of evaporation, and that cools the column of air and essentially can help lower the surface temperature as well, especially during heavy snowfall rates. I've seen it before. You think the temperature is going to be right around 30, snow starts pouring down, drops down into the upper 20s. I think that's what happens, because I think the front end of this, we're going to have some pretty heavy snow. That continues 8, 9 o'clock, and then what happens closer to lunchtime? That pink tries to show up in places like Chattanooga. It's going to be tight. You know, North Georgia, Northeast Alabama, south of the Tennessee state line, you have the best chance of seeing the mix, especially early on in the afternoon. And then that tries to surge to the north as some warmer air moves in. And this model is trying to produce some rain later in the day. It's just some plain old-fashioned rain. So that has the warm air and maybe some downsloping winds creating, you know, the middle finger essentially in the Tennessee Valley, or the snow dome, whatever you want to call it, because you can see it on radar. It looks like a finger going up through Johnson City, Newport, Maryville, and Athens and Dayton. And at times in the past, that has ruined snowfall potential in places like Chattanooga and Athens and Dalton. Will that happen this time? Well, this just shows the possibility. There's a lot of possibilities, and no model is right. They're just tools we use. This isn't what the radar is going to look like at 750. It's just a possibility of what it may look like. So still a lot of freezing rain and sleet and all the above out there with this short-term model, and then some snow on the back end. So just, again, that's just one possible solution. Let's take a look at the snowfall potential with this. Not that impressive. 1 to 2 inches across North Georgia, a couple inches into Chattanooga, Athens, Dayton, with higher amounts to the north. You can see that dark blue, 4 to 8 inches. So we're pretty close. This has more of a mixing solution with warmer air here across the Tennessee Valley, and then possible ice accumulation favoring some of the higher elevations in northeast Alabama, Georgia, and even down into western North Carolina, up to maybe 1/10 of an inch of ice, which will do plenty of, I wouldn't say damage, but will cause plenty of problems. And here's a look at the potential for sleet as well. So there's going to be a little bit of everything on the table, and that's just one run in particular. So here's your types of precipitation, and essentially what happens with rain, you have the snow at the base of the cloud, but the entire atmosphere layer from the ground all the way up to wherever the freezing line is going to fall down as rain. Freezing rain is a little more difficult because you have the cold air at the base of the cloud. Temperatures at the surface are below 32, but in the upper atmosphere, like, it's kind of like a sandwich. The bun is cold and the bottom bun is cold, but the ingredients are warm. So it falls into, the snowflakes fall into that column of warmer air. melts, doesn't have time to refreeze. Sleet's different because you have a thinner layer of warm air. Snow falls down to it, melts, but it has enough time to refreeze into little pellets. And with snow, that entire column of air is below 32, so the snowflake starts at the base of the cloud and doesn't melt at all, and you get the snow all the way down to the surface. That's what we hope happens, because when you start adding in freezing rain, sleet, and even rain, you just get a sloppy, slushy mess out there. But that's just one of the possible solutions, and a lot of our high-resolution models indicating that there could be freezing rain and sleet during the afternoon and evening, and maybe even a few patches of rain. So we'll have to watch those temperature profiles pretty quickly. The global models, they're not high-resolution, but usually they give us a pretty decent depiction of what could happen. This is the European model. By about 7, 8 o'clock, snow spreading in from the southwest, becoming heavy during the mid-morning. But notice the timestamp here, through about 3 o'clock, still mainly a snow event for most of the area. And then the pink starts to show up later in the day, and some of that warm air tries to move in, which could transition things towards the back end of this to more of a wintry mix and rain to the south, and then some high elevation snow showers throughout Saturday morning. So with this model in particular, you know you have a higher potential for seeing accumulating snow here early on. So we can take a look at those snow totals with the European. This is the latest data. A solid 3 to 5 inches. So from northeast Alabama, and a lot of that would come in on the front end. The GFS for the American, snow moving in a little bit early, probably some evaporation going on. Pretty decent snow rates as we continue into the afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock when we start to see some of that mixing, trying to surge to the north. Snow on the back end of this. This also has a snowier solution than it had with some of last night's runs. And look at these totals. Now this is probably a boom scenario, but this is showing higher amounts of 6, 7, maybe even 8 inches. So setting up more of a bullseye here across the Tennessee Valley. This would all be very nice if this happened, because we're not dealing with as much sleet and freezing rain, but these totals probably aren't taking into account some of the sleet accumulation either. So it probably wouldn't be 7 inches on the ground. It would probably be like 3 or 4 with sleet mixed in at times. But nonetheless, that shows you the range we're looking at. Our short-term model guidance showing lower amounts, our global model showing higher amounts. So it makes the forecast difficult. I can tell you that. So the latest totals just at a single point here in Chattanooga, GFS about 7.3, Euro 4.6. So, yesterday we had that swath of 4 to 8, including Chattanooga, so that would verify that forecast, but that's not what I'm going with today, because that warm air, it likes to sneak in. And last night David had 2 to 4 inches. I'm going with 2 to 5. I think 5 is probably the upper limit for now, depending on how things play out, because I do think we're going to have some pretty significant snowfall rates, maybe over 1 inch an hour during the morning hours, and everyone's going to see snow during the morning. The air column is going to support that. So you're going to see snow. It's just the afternoon and evening. That's where there's a little more contention, I guess. We don't know as much as we would like. These winter storms, they're tricky. There's always surprises. Somebody's going to get way more snow than they were supposed to. Somebody who was supposed to get a lot of snow ain't going to get hardly anything. That's just the way it goes. Because 10 miles can mean a world of difference. Saw that last year. Remember 2021 here, Chattanooga got a sloppy 1, 2 inches. Soddy Daisy got a solid 5, close to the top of the county, picking up 7, 8 inches, and then Knoxville got hammered with that storm. So differences in geography and topography all make huge differences. But the reason I'm going with widespread 2 to 5, I'll explain that shortly, but I think the further north you go, you have a better chance of getting into that widespread 3 to 6. So Nashville, Knoxville, the Plateau, Southern Kentucky, probably all going to get a good thumping, and then Western North Carolina get decent snow from this as well. But here's a look at our probability of 3 inches with the Euro, and we've talked about the ensembles, just a mean of a bunch of different runs of the European with different starting conditions and initializations. I mean, that puts us at about a 90 to 100% chance across southeast Tennessee and northwest Georgia and all of North Alabama of picking up 3 inches or more. And the GFS is pretty much the same. That swath of 3 inches, very good probability for North Georgia, South Tennessee, western parts of North Carolina, and Middle Tennessee as well. And then if you look at the GFS ensemble with the 6 inches, I mean, it even has a really good chance of that happening. So that makes things, tricky, because we're looking at this high resolution model data that has a more defined warm nose, which is that warm layer in the upper atmosphere that could come all the way to the surface and see temperatures rising to around 33, 34, while you have our, Canadian, European GFS models all indicating a colder solution, which would put more snow here across the Tennessee Valley. So that makes things tricky. And that's why I wanted to show you all this, to kind of explain my thinking. So not necessarily picking a middle road, but I'm thinking, based on what I've seen before with some of these storms, you get that moisture coming in. It's really heavy, and if the atmosphere supports snow and you have high snowfall rates, you can get a couple inches very quickly. Back in, I want to say 2021, we had a cold rain here in Chattanooga, but at my parents' house in Emmons, South Carolina, they got 6-7 inches of snow in about 6-7 hours, and then it transitioned over to sleet and freezing rain and became more of a sloppy mess. And this system is pretty similar to what we had in February 25th back in 2015 here in Chattanooga, low riding on the Gulf Coast. You had, of course, the cold air already in place, and the cold air is in place. Go outside, you feel it. So it just depends on how strong this low pressure gets. Stronger low pressure, stronger warm advection. And that means that warm nose may try to surge north. If it's a little bit weaker, the warm advection may stay further to the south. And the exact track, if it tracks further to the north across central Alabama, central Georgia, we're going to get the wintry mix. South and then heading out into the open waters of the Atlantic, you have a better chance of saying all snow. So as of now, I think we get a heavy window of snow between, the onset 7, 8 o'clock until about 1, maybe 2, and then you'll probably notice some pink showing up and trying to surge to the north during the afternoon and evening. That could waver back and forth. Further north you go, probably going to stay all snow. But here in the Southern Valley, a lot of times that warm air with the low-level jet coming out of the southwest likes to warm those temperatures, and we've, again, seen it many times where that can totally destroy snowfall potential here in places like Chattanooga and even up towards Johnson City and the Tri-City. So that's what we're looking at. Not a straightforward forecast, never is when we're forecasting winter weather, but I assure you we're doing the best we can. And if we don't get 2 to 5 inches, it's on me. I apologize for that, but that's what I'm looking at, after doing the analysis this morning. So this is just some complications we have. How heavy is the snow initially? Because if it is pretty heavy, we're going to have temperatures dropping, because high rates of snowfall and precipitation will cool the column of air even more. If that drops it down into the upper 20s, it's going to be harder for temperatures to warm above 32 later in the day. If the precipitation stays lighter, temperature is probably going to stay closer to freezing, a lot easier to get into the mid-30s, and that's where you could have maybe even a cold rain come into the picture. How much of that warm air surges north with that low-level jet and warm advection? That's tough to really predict. Timing on a possible changeover, when does that occur? Probably the afternoon and evening if it happens, especially the further south you go, and the location of that snow and wintry mix line. Does it stay put, or does it waver back and forth, or does it surge north and just create a wintry mess throughout the evening? So nonetheless, it's going to be a high impact storm. We're going to be dealing with a lot of forecast challenges here, but we're within 24 hours of the onset of precipitation, so we're getting closer and closer to, let's just wait and see what happens. Hate to say that, but a lot of times when we see the storm forming and you see, okay, it's snowing and sleeting here further south than we thought, the temperatures are colder, so this might be a colder system. Then we can start to get a better idea of, okay, we have a better chance of snow. If it's the reverse, it's not even snowing here, it's actually raining in central Arkansas, then we're like, all right, this could be more of a bust potential. So we definitely have a boom potential of 6+ inches of snow. We also have a bust of 2 or less, but I do think everyone does get a nice coating, so the ground should be white, even in northeast Alabama, North Georgia, southeast Tennessee, western North Carolina through lunch. And then as we get that wintry mix and mixed bag later in the day, it becomes a little more complicated, and I think travel will be rough regardless because it's been so cold lately. This is going to accumulate quickly on the road. So going with 2 to 5 inches widespread, higher amounts to the north, lower amounts to the south, especially as you get into that kind of sloppy mess. Going to have some slick roads Saturday and probably into Sunday because look at those lows. 17 Saturday night, 22 Sunday, 20 on Monday night, and 19 on Tuesday night. Temperature's still going to stay in the 30s, so it's going to be cold. If we were to get a decent amount of snow and wintry mess, it's probably going to stick around. And with temperatures rising above freezing, it melts and then could refreeze on some of those secondary and tertiary roads moving forward. So there's a lot at play here. Still going to be a significant winter storm for the entire southeast and mid-south. There's just some fine details that we're still trying to iron out, and we'll continue to keep you updated throughout the afternoon because we'll have different data. It'll be even closer to the onset. We'll see the storm developing, so we'll have a better idea. And again, forecasting, it's not an exact science. We look at the variables and the data we get, and we try to make the best possible solution. We can look at past storms, and that also helps us. So there's a lot of things at play. We'll do the best to keep you updated. That's really all I had. I'll come back a little bit later if another update is warranted, but I hope you have a great day. Try to stay warm out there.